Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with, well, something you asked me to do, and I'm always happy to acquiesce to your suggestions, if I can anyway. We've been doing a series of, works that I never got until I heard a version by a certain performer that proved to be a revelation, a path to understanding. Well, one of you said, what works you still don't get? I never had a path to understanding. Oh, there are quite a few of those. And so I made a little list. I didn't want to make a series out of it because, it seemed to me that would be too much negativity. But there is some stuff that I really don't get. Even though I acknowledge its greatness, its genius, its worth, the fact that other people swear by it, all of those things. And it just goes to show, I hope these videos aren't taken negatively at all. I hope that they're taken in a sense of, this is out there for you to choose. And you can choose what you like and you can ignore what you don't like. And it's okay not to like it, even if it's supposed to be famous and fabulous. And you should be able to dislike things without guilt. That's the point. And not let anyone else browbeat you into thinking there's something wrong with you because you don't like some of this stuff. So is my list of 10 pieces that I really, really don't get. First, Wagner's Parsifal. Ugh. It's long, it's slow, it's dull. I find the story completely, totally, entirely unsympathetic and uninteresting and foolish. And the music is gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. From one moment to the next, absolutely, absolutely suffused with inner light. It's magnificent music. It really is. But stick it all together in a 4.5 hour long clump or so, and if I find it just intolerable, because I have no sympathy for any of the characters except for Kundry, who I think is the only sympathetic person in the entire opera. And of course, because she's female, she gets treated like trash by Wagner. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I have to say, I have a couple observations, though, that I just have to share with you. First is, having been told very loudly that Parsifal being a Bühnenweih Festspiel thing, a sanctified, sacred festival play thing. German is wonderful that way. You could just glom on the compounds and make these ridiculous pseudo-profound phrases. And Wagner was very good at that. He did Gesamtkunstwerk after all. So, there's that. But I first got the Schulte recording back in the day because I had his ring and I loved the ring. The ring was really cool, right? So I thought, Parsifal. So I put it on and put on the prelude, which is, it's about 12 to 15 minutes long normally, and fell asleep. And I never fall asleep during music. Only very seldom do I fall asleep listening to things. Generally, listening to things keeps me awake. Well, Parsifal knocked me out. I was out like a light. So I tried a few times, and I never got past the prelude. I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. It just knocked me out. So finally, I went to see it live. They were doing the Parsifal prelude. And it's fun to watch because, it's nothing but chorale things in the brass, followed by string arpeggios. And they start in the basses and they work their way up through the violins till you get the flutes carrying it up or whatever. And it's cool to watch because it travels through the orchestra, and I still fell asleep. It was in the second or third wave. It does it way too many times. Couldn't do it. So I started listening to the opera, ignoring the prelude, which helped, actually, to tell you the truth, because once people start singing and they're talking about things, it sort of perks up, sort of, kind of, maybe a little. And the second act, of course, is fun. And I remember I had to go see it. It was part of our school trips to the Metropolitan Opera, and they were doing Parsifal, and I went to see it. And the only thing I remember about the performance, well, there are two things I remembered about the performance. One was the harp glissando. In the end of the second act, when what's his name, the bad guy, throws his spear at Parsifal and he catches it, or it's somehow suspended, or I don't know, something magical happens, and the harps go whoosh. Oh my goodness, that woke me right up. I mean, it's wow, there was a harp glissando, something to pay attention to. So that was nice. The Good Friday music has always passed me by completely. I find it completely uninteresting. I remember the first time I heard the opera, I said, oh, the Good Friday music, the Transformation music. Didn't even notice it. I mean, didn't notice it at all. And so, the harp glissando was wonderful. And then at the end, the lights came on. It was blue. They're transfiguring, and everything was blue. And the lights came on. I looked at the person next to me, and he was still blue. I think he was dead. I don't know. His wife said, "Come on, Marty, it's time to leave," and hit him with her elbow, and he went plonked over. I'm not sure whether he was dead or alive, but that was when I realized that there is some music that sets your pulse racing and some music that just stops it dead in its tracks. And that, for me, is Parsifal. And, maybe I'll some year come around to it. I understand what it is. I am completely and totally unsympathetic. And that's just my constitution. So Parsifal's number one. Number two, Schumann's Carnival. I mean, everybody loves Schumann's Carnival, don't they? I could never stand it. Part of it was probably the fact that my, father had this Pavlovian reaction to Schumann because he was forced to play it when he was trying to, play the piano. He was a superb pianist. I mean, like a prodigy pianist. And he wanted to play jazz, and his cranky old teacher would only let him play Schumann. And every time I said Schumann, my father would go like, yeah, like that. But I liked lots of Schumann. I liked the symphonies. I liked the chamber music. I got to, there's some other things I never quite got to, which by him. But Carnival, I love the David's Bundler Tenza and the symphonic variations and the Songs of Dawn. What a cool piece that nobody knows. There's lots of great Schumann piano music. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that, of course. But Carnival, for some reason, it just annoys me. I have a hard time. I think it's actually something essential in Schumann's melodic character. Something about the way he shapes his tunes. They somehow sound to me very, very foursquare and somehow uninteresting, predictable. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. There are just some pieces you're never going to get. Carnival may be one of them for me. And I've heard wonderful performances. I mean, I have a couple dozen of them sitting around. I could recognize a good version when I hear a good version, but I'm just never going to get excited about the piece. Again, we're all built differently. Next, number three, Tchaikovsky's Rococo Variations. Oh, what a boring piece of hooey that thing is. And, I know, for example, that everyone plays this sort of like, revised version that Tchaikovsky didn't revise. And sometimes they do the original version. I've listened to both versions. I only know the Rococo Variations because it's usually a coupling to the Dvorak Cello Concerto on compact discs. And that's really why I listen to it, because it's there and I just don't feel like taking the CD off when the Dvorak's over. Possibly it's a fact that in comparison to the Dvorak, it's a piece of cosmic nothingness. Or it could be just Tchaikovsky in his faux Rococo classicizing mode. There's something about it that I find a little bit off-putting, I think. It's perfumed and fluffy and just really, really uninspired to me. I mean, he does some good stuff with it in Pique Dame, the Queen of Spades. That's his best sort of faux classical writing in that piece. I found it quite charming. But in the Rococo Variations and also in the Mozartiana Suite Number 4, it's another piece that just never got it. I just can't get through it half the time. But the Rococo Variations, no way. It's totally uninteresting to me, and nothing that I've ever heard or any performance will make it interesting or has made it interesting to me so far. So after that, we go to a little chamber music. Chamber music is always fun to deal with and to assert that you have no idea what it's doing. The Brahms string quartets. Now, Brahms was a master of chamber music, of course, and supposedly he wrote like 20 string quartets and destroyed all of them. Well, it shows. His string quartets are overwritten. Hans Keller, the string quartet coach and really kind of psychotically crazy Schoenberg student, he was like nuts. He worked for the BBC, and he wrote a book on string quartets. He said there are only three composers of string quartets: Haydn, Mendelssohn, and Schoenberg, because he was a Schoenberg pupil. I mean, he was kind of a loopy guy. But he made a very good point, a really, really good point that I think is singularly applicable to the Brahms quartets and explains why I have a problem with them. He said a string quartet is not a simultaneous dialogue between four equal people. He said that's ridiculous. What you wind up with is a clogged up mess if you write string quartets that way. What he says is a string quartet is a succession of ensembles in which any part is potentially the predominant part. So you can have all four players with somebody on top, or you can have a trio or a duo or a something. You know, there's that constantly changing texture, and the taking advantage of the opportunities for constantly changing textures. I find Brahms quartets to be just overly busy. I think the same thing is true, by the way, of the Mozart Prussian quartets, though I like them. I mean, I get them more. But those Brahms quartets, oh my goodness, they are so thick. And it's amazing how much more relaxed Brahms was in like the sextets and even his quintets, where he had the extra player. Mozart was that way too, by the way, in his quintets. That's why they're so great, because they could relax just a little bit. They didn't have to be as polyphonically or contrapuntally rigorous. They didn't have to keep things always happening somewhere at some level with too much stuff going on all at once. I just find them dull and monotonous, monochrome. And I have friends who adore them, absolutely adore them. I mean, I had a friend, an acquaintance, who swore by the Brahms quartets, particularly the Alban Berg recording that was on Telefunken back in those days. And I did listen to them. I keep trying. I mean, some are better than others. There's only three of them. Remember, one or two. But boy, they are not his best chamber works, in my view. And I would much prefer to listen to any of Brahms's other chamber music. His chamber music with piano is splendid. It's all terrific. But no, not those quartets. So after that, here's one that's really going to surprise you: Handel's water music. I have never understood what the fuss is about Handel's water music. It's a typical Baroque suite. I mean, yes, it has some delightful numbers. Da 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 ba 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 da 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 ba da ba 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 ba. I mean, you could hum the whole thing. It's tuneful. It's just a grab bag of isolated movements that he wrote to play on a barge, and I mean, compared to something like the Opus 6 Concerti Grossi, or even the fireworks music, which I adore because it's all wind-based, I think. But the water music has never done it for me. I just don't see the point. It's just like generic Baroque stuff. And I know that's a heretical notion. It really is. But and again, I have like a zillion recordings of it, and I make comparisons between them, and I can certainly tell you what I think the better performances are. But boy, the music doesn't do it for me at all. I guess it was there to just sort of amuse the king on his barge. I always wondered how they played it on a barge. I mean, they must have had a separate barge with the instruments on it. And it has strings. And I mean, outdoor music for strings, especially period instrument strings, I can't imagine how it all came off. And the music itself, no matter how you arrange it and what suites or bits or, because you can organize it in different ways. Nothing happening there. A couple good tunes. Okay, that's nice. Next, Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Sonata. Now, the Second Piano Sonata exists in two versions. There is the original version, which was quite long, and there is the revised version, which is something like 5 or 6 minutes shorter, where he just cut and chopped and cut and chopped. And I wonder why he bothered, because both versions of it seem like a kind of shapeless pudding. Now, one of you in the comments mentioned that you always had a problem with his work too, until you listened to the Zoltan Kocis recording of it. And I agree. That's an amazing performance and a fabulous record. And I enjoy listening to it because it's Zoltan Kocis doing, playing. But the work itself, wow, it still sounds to me terribly, terribly cluttered. And I don't think that the form, the large-scale form, is the issue. I think it's the moment by moment texture that's the issue. It's the chromatic sludge that sort of gloms up all the melodies. And I mean, that's how it impresses me. I wind up criticizing the music, but I should criticize me. I mean, it really is a reflection on me and my feeling of the music. You know, how it strikes me. And it strikes me as just a leaden pudding of tangled notes and pianistic stuff. I don't know if I'm ever going to really finally enjoy it. I really don't. It does absolutely nothing for me. Speaks to me not a bit. So there you go. Next, you're on number 7. Yeah, number 7. Elgar's Cello Concerto. Oh, yes, how guilty I felt because there was Jacqueline Dupre and the British critics slobbering over that recording with Barbaroli endlessly. And I put it on, and I think it was coupled with the C pictures with Janet Baker. And I really liked the C pictures, even if the last one sounds like Hello Dolly. You know, da 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 da. Yeah, well, anyway. But the Cello Concerto, it sounds to me just so tired, so faded. You know, it's like your great grandmother's living room. I always think of Miss Havisham, you know, in Great Expectations, sitting in a room with her wedding dress with everything moldering around her. To me, that's Elgar's Cello Concerto. Some people swear by it. Some people adore it. I know. Cellists have very little choice. They have to love it because there isn't that much cello repertoire. I mean, there actually is. There's a lot of contemporary cello repertoire. It's fabulous. But if you're going to actually play something in a concert, you wind up doing the Elgar Cello Concerto. And it's like the only cello concerto aside from Dvorak's that's like a great romantic cello concerto. Although the Elgar is disappointing even in that respect because it's rather small scale and short. I mean, it's half an hour or so. It's not a long piece. It's not a big piece. I suppose you could call it intimate and poetic for that reason, but it's just a bunch of sad sounding sequences. I think it's kind of pathetic. I really do. That's how it strikes me. I don't know about you. Next, Beethoven, Fidelio. I know I'm not alone in this one. I mean, it's kind of a cheap shot because Fidelio has always had a reputation as, you know, a flawed masterpiece. Which I suppose it is. But what got me about Fidelio, it's kind of surprising, you may think, is that I knew the story long before I heard the actual opera. And what kind of amazes me is that it's not that Act 1 is so uninteresting compared to Act 2. I mean, that's true. That's a given. That's something you have to kind of just get over with. But it's just how little the thing contains. I mean, you hear all these comments about it, about the heroism and triumph and Leonora Overture Number 3 stuffed in the middle of the third act, the second act, and you know, the triumph of the human spirit. And I mean, I get it. Florestan's in a dungeon, you know. I just don't care. I don't care about these people at all. It seems to me that Beethoven was looking at them more or less as archetypes. I mean, in the first act, it's just, you know, comedy stuff basically. But in the second act, I mean, there's some wonderful gloomy music at the beginning. Oh, it's just terrific. It's absolutely terrific. But you just want to get to the point where, like, Leonora just pulls out the gun and she ought to just shoot the guy and be done with it. It's absolutely, you know, the trumpet goes off. You know, and then they all just stand around there waiting for what's his name to show up. And I'm sorry, I'm totally unmoved. I'm unmoved by the story. I mean, the way Beethoven sets the story. It just seems to me the piece is full of timing issues. I mean, you know, the characters don't have any opportunity to develop into anything. And by the time we get to Act 2, you're at the end, right? I mean, so nothing is given time to logically unfold. It just sort of happens, and then it happens, and then it ends, and it bores me. It just bores me. So that's it. And I mean, I love the Klemper recording of it. You know, both the live one and the studio one. I mean, that's my choice. I think it's phenomenal. one of the great Beethoven recordings out there. I mean, if I want to listen to Fidelio, I listen to that one. I mean, I appreciate, what they're doing. I understand what they're doing. I understand great singing when I hear it. But it all seems to me kind of a lost cause. So that, and lots of people feel that way. I feel kind of good about that one, actually. You're supposed to come around at some point in your life to the idea that you've always been wrong about Fidelio. Well, I'm not coming around. Not happening. Next, here's another one that may get you. Bach's Keyboard Concerto in D minor, BWV 1052. Supposedly his greatest concerto, certainly his greatest keyboard concerto, and you know it, right? And then the harpsichord comes in with like that. I just find it depressingly relentless. It's the most grim piece of music I've ever heard. Now, some people think grim is good, right? We like hearing things that are sad, that are pathetic. Tchaikovsky's Pathetique Symphony, tragic music. This isn't tragic. This sounds to be just sort of dogged, relentless. And especially when it's played on a harpsichord where you just have that constant movement. It never stops. It just keeps going and going and going with that same endless pattern. Chicka, 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 chicka. It's like sewing machine music. It's mechanical. And the slow movement, which is, it's like a chaconne. It has like a ground bass. And it's oh gosh, it's bleak and depressing. And it's all just so D minor. I mean, it sounds like it's monotonous. Monotonous, and monotonous not in a monotonous in a gloom and doom way. It actually sort of encapsulates everything I don't like about Bach. That feeling of relentless rigor, like he's going to work out every goddamn motive to its utmost limit, and it doesn't matter how long it takes or how unpleasant the experience is. He's not going to be done until every single aspect has been explored to the point of just bludgeoning you to death over it. And I actually know. I mean, you realize it was originally a violin concerto, and it's been restored as a violin concerto, and I like it much better in the violin concerto restoration. I think it's much, much easier to listen to. I think it's much more expressive. I think the violin allows far more opportunities for light and shade and expressive emphasis than a harpsichord does. And maybe that's part of the problem. As a keyboard arrangement, it's a very, very different piece as far as I'm concerned. When I want to listen to BWV 1052, I try and listen to the violin concerto version if I can, even though there have been unbelievably great recordings, like Leonhardt's thing with that unnamed ensemble on Sion. Just great recordings of the piece on harpsichord. And there are moments when I enjoy listening to them just because I enjoy listening to the great performance of the work. But I dread that piece. I really do. It just really lays on you like a ton of bricks. I did see a performance of it once at UC Berkeley with Trevor Pinnock. And I remember the performance very vividly because, he made an announcement before that because they only had a harpsichord that was, he said, rather slender tone was his expression. They were going to play the piece one instrument per part, solo strings, effectively. So as not to overbalance the harpsichord. Oh, I wish they'd overbalance the harpsichord. The hell with the harpsichord. I mean, I forget what was the name of that auditorium at Berkeley. I don't remember. Leisner, I think, wasn't it? Something like that. And it's a big room, and there was nothing more awful than this grim, relentless, in-your-face piece made to sound small and grim and relentless and in your face with no dynamics on top of everything else. Oh God, that was a chore. However good the performance may have been, it was a chore. It was the wrong thing in the wrong room in the wrong place. It was awful. However, there is one work, my however piece, that many of you have asked me to talk about that I have resisted discussing because I just don't like it. It's Mozart's Requiem. Now, there may be an extra musical element in my not liking, because we all know that Mozart never finished it. So that seems to offer a wedge, an entree into not liking it. And I felt that was my fault. I felt that I was like, really smart, and I knew the parts that Mozart did and Mozart didn't do. And I didn't like it because Süssmayr was incompetent. And a lot of people say that. They say that to make excuses for the fact that the work is somehow unsatisfactory in many versions or in many people's listening experience. But then I went and actually looked at what Mozart wrote versus what the other people did. And I realized that most of the parts I didn't like were all by Mozart. Yes, particularly the tuba miram, that stupid trombone solo. Oh my God, how could he write that? Horrible, awful. I mean, what could be less in keeping with the tone and tenor of the actual text? Mozart was, an inveterate vocal music composer, and he's trying to make the trombone sing as if in a comic opera. And it sounds like it's singing as if in a comic opera. I just don't get what he's doing. Now, some of the music is beautifully suited to the text. The Lacrimosa, for example, the bits that were in Amadeus, Confutatis, Maledictus, the sad things. I mean, Mozart knew how to cry. He could make his music weep. It sounds requiem-y. The opening is very, very beautiful. I mean, it's not that there aren't pretty bits. There are beautiful bits, but it's just unsatisfying as a whole. I find it patchy. I find it fragmented. I find it somewhat unmoving, aside from a couple of those, really nice bits. And we listen to it, I think, for the nice bits. Because I know what people are going to say. If I say, I don't like the Mozart Rococo, they go, what about the Lacrimosa? What about, yeah, it has some nice bits. But then it has plenty of bits that just do nothing and go nowhere, as far as I'm concerned, and that don't add up to a satisfying whole listening experience for me. When it's over, I always find myself thinking that it was a letdown, an anticlimax. So there you have it, my friends. 10 fabulous works, beloved masterpieces, things by the greatest composers operating at full inspirational overdrive. And I don't get any of them. I just don't. That's how I feel about them. And I know that a lot of you will disagree, and a lot of you have your own selection of pieces you just don't get, which you're more than welcome to share, because it's a healthy thing. It's a healthy thing to use your power of choice fearlessly, and to allow yourself simply the luxury of not being intimidated by great works just because they're supposed to be great works. It's your life. It's your time. It's your whole, entertainment and pleasure, and you get to choose what you like and what you don't. So hopefully this list will inspire some of you to finally confess that some of these pieces that you were browbeaten into saying that you loved, you really didn't love so much. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.